Continuing debate, the honourable member for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has done a great job in the last little while of uniting the country. There is a great Canadian tax revolt against him in the constant, never-ending tax increases that is coming after 8 years. Canadians know they have had enough. They cannot afford the cost of this Prime Minister any longer. He is uniting the country against him and the constant tax increases Canadians are facing. 70% of Canadians are opposed to the latest spike in the carbon tax, a cruel April Fool's joke on April the 1st that's going to see a 23% increase in the carbon tax at a time when the millions of Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. And the punishment and the never-ending tax increases under this Prime Minister, fully propped up by the NDP every step of the way, is all part of their plan to quadruple the carbon tax in the coming years. 70% of Canadians, 7 premiers from every part of this country are united against this latest tax hike. And it's gotten so bad, it's the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador that has called out the Prime Minister and demanded a stop to this latest increase. It's even provincial Liberal parties in New Brunswick and Kathleen Wynne's party in Ontario, the Ontario Liberal Party, is now so tired of this Prime Minister. He's so toxic now and so unpopular, he is uniting the country against everybody, including the Ontario Liberal Party, that now is coming out and saying they just don't want to spike the hike. They're even saying now they're going to axe the tax entirely. That just goes to tell you when the party of Kathleen Wynne won't even support the carbon tax anymore, you know they are on the wrong track of Canadians. The great Canadian tax revolt, Mr. Speaker, is well underway. The numbers speak for themselves. I'm going to talk about a few numbers of fact about the struggle Canadians are going through. $700. That is how much a family of 4 in Canada is going to pay more on their grocery bill in 2024. This year alone. That doesn't even factor the increase of the carbon tax into that. This latest increase, a 23% hike, is going to drive up the cost of food, of heating, and filling up your car even more. And it's getting worse, Mr. Speaker. We've seen, sadly, food bank reports over and over and over again these past few years talking about a surge in the number of visits to food banks in this country. The Liberals and the NDP say all the time, we've got a plan, our plan is working, it's helping. It is not. And here's the fact. A recent food charity report came out and said food banks in this country are bracing. After record usage in 2023, they are bracing for 1 million more visits by Canadians to food banks this year. This is insanity. The Prime Minister, the NDP are absolutely tone deaf to keep doubling down, quadrupling down, frankly, or to quadruple the carbon tax, and think this is not going to get even worse. And it's gotten so bad for charities. 36% of charities last year, Mr. Speaker, had to turn people away because they were running out of resources. The Liberals and the NDP are about the only ones left in this country, very few, this costly coalition that are not getting with the program. Canadians are tired of the tax hikes. They cannot afford 61 cents a litre on the price of gas in the coming years. It is driving up the cost of living. It is driving up the cost of groceries, the cost of doing business, and it's taking business away from this country and having even something as simple as food. The abundance of great agricultural land in this country, we're now seeing companies and grocery stores importing food from around the world rather than having it grown here close to home when they're nailing greenhouses with the carbon tax, farmers, an astronomical amount of the carbon tax, hundreds of thousands of dollars at one grain operation, drawing operation in my riding on their way to quadruple it. Enough is enough. And here's the thing about the problem, Mr. Speaker. We know the Liberal math and their promises never add up. That's why the budget just doesn't balance itself, is because their math never makes sense. It makes sense to the average Canadian to know it's driving up the cost of their household budget. It's driving up their mortgage now, it's driving up groceries, it's driving up heating, it's driving up having a car and taking your kids to hockey or to go out and about like Canadians do. The Liberals promised $50 a ton. That's as far as they're going to go with the carbon tax. They broke that promise and they tripled that, about $170 a ton, after promising it wouldn't go above 50. They promised rebates for businesses. All the carbon tax that small businesses and businesses pay in this country, they give them zero rebate, let alone the rebates they do give to households, which we know and the parliamentary budget officer says does not cover the carbon tax cost that families pay. Businesses get nothing. They broke their promise. And now they try to get you to believe in their talking points and their little chart and say Canadians are better off with the rebates that they get. Is nonsense. Nobody believes it, and neither does the parliamentary budget officer, because in his reports, the facts are clear. The average family of 4 in a Canadian province is projected only to get a certain amount back in the rebate. They are out hundreds of dollars, regardless of which province you live in. If you're in Ontario, you're out on average in 2024 and 2025, $627. Alberta families, $911 out. $502 in Manitoba. The list goes on and on and on. The more they increase this carbon tax, the bigger difference in debt and struggle Canadian families are going to face. Mr. Speaker, one of the important things, and this is what you got to read the fine print when it comes to these Liberals and their NDP coalition partners. They never just give a straight answer. Watch Question Period any day. They'll never give you a straight answer. The carbon tax in the coming years is going to quadruple. And here's how. They don't just do it with one carbon tax. They've got 2 carbon taxes. There's the first carbon tax, which is going to total 37 cents a litre on the price of gas in the coming years. The rebates, as I just confirmed, don't even cover that. But now they've got a second carbon tax coming in every part of the country. They go and they word salad these things, they change the name. A clean fuel standard. It is a second carbon tax. 0 rebates for anybody. That's going to be 17 cents a litre on the price of gas in the coming years. And if that's not bad enough, Mr. Speaker, what really triggers and infuriates Canadians is the fact that the Liberals and the NDP, what do? They don't only have one carbon tax, they've got a second carbon tax, and then they tax the tax. They put the GST and HST on carbon tax 1 and carbon tax 2 for a total of 61 cents a litre. Out of touch. And here's the thing, Mr. Speaker, that just, I think, puts the cherry on top of just how out of touch and aloof, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, the Liberals and the NDP, is they keep saying for the last year, Canadians are united, as I mentioned more than ever before, against the carbon tax and against this latest April 1st increase. The PMO put out talking points last week with the title, "Is the carbon tax suffering from a failure to communicate?" Sorry, that wasn't the PMO, that was the CBC that wrote that article. I'm sorry, I think it was probably provided by the PMO to the CBC to write, where they try to defend again. The entire argument for the last year from these Liberals is, it's just a communication problem. We're just not explaining ourselves enough. Canadians know themselves. They cannot afford this Prime Minister, they can't afford this carbon tax, and they can't afford a 23% increase on it on April the 1st, on its way to quadrupling in the coming years. If this was a communication problem, it'd be solved, because this Prime Minister loves photo ops, he loves all these news conferences and these flashy word salad. In the last year, Mr. Speaker, as Canadians, more Canadians, 1 million more food bank visits are expected this year, more people than ever before using food banks, mortgage defaults, the economic news gets worse. The only thing this Prime Minister has done in the last couple of months is they renamed the carbon tax. That is how out of touch they are. Mr. Speaker, this carbon tax and the cruel latest increase, the never-ending increases, is not a communication problem. It's a tax problem. Canadians have finally realized they've had enough, and it's time, Mr. Speaker, spike the hike, axe the tax, and finally give Canadians some relief.
Yeah.